So the question is, what do you do with guitar tracks where the guitar players are playing two different parts on the rhythm guitar tracks? And also, should you be mastering your mix within the mix session, or should you create a separate session for your mastering projects? Welcome to Viewer Questions Answered, episode 37. So before we dive into this excellent group of questions submitted by my loyal subscribers, I just want to let you know that if you're truly looking to improve the sound of your productions and mixes, I don't care if you're using an analog console, outboard gear, high-end plugins, cheapo plugins, overpriced plugins, stock plugins, Reaper, Cubase, Pro Tools, it doesn't matter. You know what does matter? How well you understand basic EQ and compression. And because of this, for right now, I'm offering you direct access to my crisp and clear heavy mix formula. The heavy mix formula is comprised of three simple primary components: an EQ and compression mixing cheat sheet that you could refer to whenever you sit down to mix. Within the PDF cheat sheet, there are clickable links to private tutorials where I cover my mixing approach for each of the main instruments within a heavy production. And below each tutorial, there's a clickable link to a multi-track download so you can mix the exact same files that I'm mixing within each of the individual tutorials. Again, the crisp and clear heavy mix formula is absolutely free, and there's a link below this video where you can click it and have direct access right now. So without any further ado, let's jump into these questions. Okay, and our first question here comes from Mike. As far as guitars, how do you handle when you have two players playing two different parts? Still one on one side and one on the other, or do you double track each and hard pan each? Okay, well, Mike, this is a great question, and the truth is it all depends. For example, let's say I have a production where I have two guitar players and I have them play exactly what they play live. And we have one guitar player on the left playing a basic rhythm, and then I have another guitar player on the right playing sort of like a lead guitar part. Now, if the parts are very separate and it actually sounds more like a solo-y, noodly kind of lead, then I'll have the left guitar player create an additional third track, which I'll pan to the right, and I'll break off the lead part on the other guitar player's track to a separate track, and I'll treat it more like a lead guitar overdub. Now that's in an extreme case, like I said, where the two riffs are completely different and one is really like a lead and one is more like a heavy rhythm. Now, if I have a section where maybe one guitar player is playing a riff and the other guitar player is playing a harmony of the riff, I'll just keep it exactly the same as how the band sounds when they're playing live. One part on the left, one part on the right, and it creates a nice hole in the center for the vocal. So again, it really depends. I kind of do it on a per case basis. If all of a sudden, again, one guitar player starts playing some noodly thing and the rhythm just drops out, then I'll have the other player just create a separate track, a separate rhythm track only for that section. If the two parts work, for me, less is more. I try to record as few layers as possible. And in that case, I'll just keep it like how they perform their parts live, one on the left, one on the right, and I move on with my life. Such an awesome question. Thank you so much for your submission, and hopefully this helps you in your future productions. Okay, our next question here comes from Kay. Dear Bobby, just out of curiosity, what's the reasoning behind creating a separate project window for mastering? Wouldn't it be more convenient to place the Ozone plugin onto your master bus during the mixing stage? Also, would it be possible to master a track using stock plugins? Great video, and thank you for simplifying the process for us beginners. Cheers. Okay, Kay, this is an excellent question. Now, what Kay is referring to is he noticed in one of my courses that I will master my track sometimes in a completely separate project, another Pro Tools session. Doesn't matter if I'm using Pro Tools, this could be Reaper, Cubase, Studio One, it really doesn't matter. And the truth is, for me, it all depends. If I'm doing an album, sometimes I will do all of my mastering in a completely separate session, especially if the songs sound a lot different and there are a lot of different textures and a lot of different layers, and one song has this drum set and another song has another drum set, one guitar sound on this song, another guitar sound on the other song. In that case, I like to master in its own unique session so I can compare and contrast the different songs. But if it's a typical production where it's the same setup for every song, I'll often just keep my mastering plugin on my two bus and I'll complete my mix through my mastering plugin. This is a tip that I got from Andy Sneap. To be honest, it really breaks the conventional rules of mastering. People treat mastering like it's some mythical process, but if your mix is solid, it really shouldn't need a whole lot in the mastering phase. And this leads me to the next question that Mr. K was asking me. Can you use stock plugins to master your track? And the truth is, if your mix is good, meaning you've handled your dynamics properly, you don't have crazy peaks and valleys and spikes, and you don't have to do anything crazy to the stereo image, then yes, all you really need is a compressor or a multi-band compressor and a limiter, especially if your limiter hardly has to do any work. And for me, that's the secret. My mastering limiter hardly does any work in the mastering phase because I've dealt with my dynamics at the source. So in that case, I could pretty much use any limiter, any multi-band compressor, and it ain't gonna matter. Now, I'm a huge fan of Ozone simply because the limiter to my ear sounds extremely transparent, but again, it's hardly doing any work, so you could swap it out for another one for most of my masters, and it's not gonna make much of a difference. So Kay, thank you so much for this excellent question, and keep me posted on it. So Kay, thank you so much for this question, and let me know if it helps you out with your future productions. Okay, and our next question here comes from Mr. Klein. It looks like you gain stage each track very low. For no particular reason, I generally gain stage all of my tracks to -18 dB on the Reaper meters, and that usually gives me around -6 dB peak on the master bus. Do you have a video on gain staging in your approach? Thanks for all the awesome content. Well, Mr. Klein, this is a great question, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't pay attention to gain staging. I don't know where this obsession has come from. Actually, I kind of do know. It really came from the analog domain, but because we're in the box and we're mixing digitally, as long as you're not clipping, and as long as you're not clipping, more specifically, your two bus or the output where it's gonna hit your converters, don't worry about it. Honestly, don't worry about it. This is sort of a myth where you have to set your levels at this magical spot and your audio is gonna be a lot sweeter. They've proven it time and time again that this is simply not true. Now, if you're recording into tape through an analog console, different ball game because there's more gray area there. Some engineers like to push the tape machine harder and push the input of their console harder, things like that. But if you're recording through a simple interface like I do, just don't clip on the way in. And when you mix, just make sure you're not clipping your master bus and you will be in great shape and you'll never have to think about gain staging ever again if you just don't clip. I should really make a video on this topic, which I will eventually. It's just gonna be a simple video. I'm just gonna say not to clip, but excellent question, and hopefully that helps you out. Okay, and our final question here comes from Mr. David. Do you think it's worth achieving maximum loudness considering all the loudness penalties with streaming services? If so, how do you get it without harming the mix? Do you think it's necessary, or is it a topic that gets way too much attention and importance? Thanks for all you do. Cheers from Italy, David. Okay, well, David, excellent question, and dude, much like with the last one, I don't really worry about it too much. Now, the way that I reference my masters, I simply take some of my favorite pro mixes that I didn't do myself, obviously mastered album releases, and I just make sure that they're perceivably just as loud, that my masters are just as loud as the pro masters, or at least in the ballpark. I don't care about RMS meters. I already know that my ceiling is set to -0.1 dB, so nothing is exceeding 0. And if it's perceivably in the ballpark just as loud, I don't worry about it. Now, yes, you're right. Obsessing about keeping your mix and making it louder than the next guy's mix is completely unnecessary in today's day and age because of streaming services. And for myself, I'll be listening to Spotify and like a Nirvana mix from the early 90s will come up and it'll be screaming loud. And then something that was released last year will be a lot quieter. And unfortunately, we don't have control over this. So obsessing about making your mix as loud as humanly possible is a very 2000s kind of thing, back when people listened to CDs and they wanted to make sure that their mix was louder when their album came up in the CD changer, but those days are over. People don't really listen to CDs, at least not for the most part. So I just don't worry about it. I just make sure that my master is in the ballpark to other professional masters level-wise, especially the perceivable loudness. I don't really care, again, about the average peak level or the RMS values or any of that kind of thing. So hopefully that answers your question, and let me know if that points you in the right direction. So I'd just like to shout out, thank everyone for submitting this excellent group of questions. And if you sent me an email with your question, just be patient. I'll definitely get to it within one of these videos in this series. And again, if you're serious about truly improving the sound of your productions and mixes, you can have direct access right now to my Crisp and Clear heavy mix formula. You get an EQ and compression mixing cheat sheet, private mixing tutorials for each of the main instruments within a heavy mix, along with a multi-track download that accompanies each of the videos so you could practice your mixing by mixing along with me. For right now, the Crisp and Clear heavy mix formula is absolutely free, and you can have direct access by clicking the link below in this video's description. If you found this video helpful, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And do not forget to click the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I upload weekly videos on all things metal and rock production. If you're interested in some Frightbox swag, I've got t-shirts, mugs, and a ton of other cool stuff on the way. There's a link below to the Frightbox merch store in this video's description. Until next time, happy mixing.